Hello garden people, welcome back to the channel. I'm starting a new project called The Region Beacon. It will be in part a podcast, but I'll still give updates from the Community Garden of Ames, the Brown Farm, my brother and sister-in-law's place, the Brownmore Honeyberry and Small Fruit Research Institute, updates from my house in Davenport where I've been working on an integrated food forest here, and much more. But part of what I want to work on is a podcast called The Region Beacon. And so this will be the first episode of that podcast. Hope you enjoy it. Episode 1. We fight for the Salamanders. Let me preface before I begin that I intend this podcast for all regenerative-minded people. I believe in pitching a big tent and welcoming all in with open arms. The work of building community is hard, and a diverse community requires that we tolerate those with beliefs, even fundamental ones, different from our own. I believe deeply in that, and I will work towards that. But first, I must acknowledge reality as I see it now. For me, today is a dark day. I am recording this in the aftermath of the 2024 election, mere days into our new fever dream. Mere days after the United States of America, bastion of liberty, has just re-elected a man named the greatest fascist threat to America by his own generals, Donald J. Trump. He's been elected to a second term in office. He will enter the office with full control of the House of Representatives, full Senate control, full capture of the Supreme Court, in a political and media environment of misinformation and mistrust. He will enter despite his 34 felony convictions, despite the damning and diverse legal indictments that were proceeding through the courts that will now be discarded. He will enter the highest seat of power in our nation, newly and almost entirely criminally immune to violating the laws of our land. He will enter this office despite being a convicted rapist, a man on tape bragging about violating women. He is, in my estimation, a poopy-pants 78-year-old malignant narcissist born into riches who, despite backstabbing every supplicant who has supported him, bankrupting every enterprise he has led, corrupting all that he has come into contact with, has failed upwards to the office of presidency now for the second time. I see that people find his lies believable, that they find his speaking compelling. I don't know. I don't see it. I have always found him transparently to be a fraud. Maybe I have Trump derangement syndrome, as they call it. Maybe I'm just allergic to demagogues. He was chosen by millions of my fellow Americans over the eminently qualified Vice President Kamala Harris, a former attorney general, senator, a working-class advocate for justice, who has succeeded through a hostile world full of forces of racism and sexism through talent, force of will, and passion. Perhaps candidate Harris was too corporate, too moderate to energize the progressive base. She was, in my estimation, insufficiently forceful in her condemnation of the ongoing death and destruction of the people of Gaza at the hands of the ascendant right-wing Israeli zealots armed with U.S. weapons. But even there, she's far better than Trump. Those who believe in pluralistic democracy will be debating the failure of the Democratic Party in this election and the path forward for years to come. Today, I don't have the energy to add much more to the discourse than what I just said. I thought she ran a pretty good campaign with the time she was given in the economic and media environment we are in. To me, the choice was stark and obvious, both in terms of character and policy. And yet, the capricious, compulsive liar, anti-democratic wannabe authoritarian won. I grieve for my fellow Americans and for the world. The future is uncertain, but there's darkness ahead. The path forward is straight but opaque. We must wake up and go to work in the morning in a dazed sense of normalcy. Soon, the modern Republican Party, made MAGA, will control all the levers of power on the national level. Maybe they will make America great again, or keep making America great, whatever the slogan is now. Maybe they have a concept of a plan to make America great. Compared to most places in the world, and compared to most of human history, America really is quite great right now, for most people, in most ways. I, for one, doubt it will be made greater, except for maybe the oligarchs, the already unfathomably powerful and privileged in society. But time will tell. History will be the judge. I do have some predictions, though. I'm from Iowa. I already live in a state where Republicans have wielded unchecked power against the vulnerable, against women, against the environment, against the foundational civic infrastructure that holds our society together, nearly uninterruptedly for decades. It has led to our schools closing in the countryside and decaying statewide, with public funds being funneled without oversight to private institutions. It has led to the highest and still increasing rate of cancer anywhere in the country. It has resulted in record loss of topsoil and record release of poisons into the environment. It has eroded protections for working miners, left the most vulnerable kids in society without access to basic health care and support. It has assaulted the ability of auditors to audit, to hold government accountable. It has, as of this past summer, stripped women of full bodily autonomy. Time will tell what of the promised policy will be enacted at the federal level. Which of the civic institutions will corrode into rusty shells of what they have been, which will fall entirely. Time will tell what legal protections will be eliminated and what liberties will be lost. Time will tell exactly how and on whom the full force of the hammer of government will fall, but it will fall repeatedly. I see pain ahead. For me, today is a dark day. I drive an hour to work these days, to my work as a scientist who studies metabolism, a metabolomicist, as I and no one else likes to say. In my professional life, I use the power of gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, and isotope ratio mass spectrometry to understand hidden mysteries and wonders of biomolecular science. It's okay. I'd rather be a regenerative farmer, and I'm working towards it. Someday I will be. Tangibly, my work as a metabolomicist means I spend many hours most days preparing samples with pipettes and a fume hood, maintaining surprisingly expensive machines, staring at lines and Excel sheets. It's a job where I send a lot of emails, but otherwise don't have to interact with people that much. I've got some cool coworkers, which is nice, but it's a job that I also have a lot of time alone, wearing my oversized headphones, listening to music and podcasts. In the first days after the election, I threw on the pre-made Spotify playlist that has provided me comfort when I have been at my most stressed. It's called Floating Through Space. It feels like a spacewalk, and not one where you have to go out in an adrenaline-filled rush to patch a micrometeorite hole in your spaceship before it leaks out all of the air into the void. More like a spacewalk where you go out, securely tethered to your ship, but weightless in the celestial heavens. And you get to look at the Earth from afar, taking in the blue-green marble with streaks of white clouds moving across its face, a colossal mass floating like a tiny marble in the vastness of space. A spacewalk where you're made breathless by beauty, and not, like I said, one that you're made breathless by the absence of air. The playlist offers an ambient soundscape, slow and full of diffuse warmth. This week I've listened to it for hours and hours and hours, floating to work, through work, back to home, in an empty but warm days. And honestly, I've listened to a bit at home too, in the garden. It's been a tough week. We all know it's okay to grieve right now. Grieve the imperfect but brighter future that might have been. Grieve that, unlike in 2016, it seems like this was a choice not even born of a fluke of our imperfect electoral college, but a future chosen by a narrowly won majority of our neighbors. We, as a country, chose this. I've taken these days to grieve, but also to ponder the question, how do we go on? Where do we go from here? How do we live our best lives in this new world? I don't claim to have the answer, a universal answer, but I have an answer for myself, an answer that I want to offer out into the universe. The answer, we must fight for the literal and figurative salamanders. Let me explain. This past spring, my love, my partner, my wife Anna and I visited my aunt and cousins, and our dear friend Leah in Maine. It's a state far away from where I live in Iowa, but one that I visited at least yearly throughout my life because my parents made it a priority to stay in contact with my mom's sister and her family there. It's the reason that I now say aunt like a pretentious person instead of aunt like every other Iowan, because my cousins growing up made fun of me. There's a U in it. Our mom's not a bug. Kids, you know. On this trip, we did a number of things. We walked and built sandcastles on the beach, plunging into the icy Portland Ocean to rinse the sand from our bodies afterwards. We traveled to Bangor, a once prosperous forestry town and home to Stephen King. We did go past his mansion, by the way. It's pleasantly spooky. We hiked up through the Scudic Point portion of the Acadia National Forest. We ferried out through a relentless parade of ocean swells to an island filled with birds, cormorants, seagulls, and puffins. They're all great. We went for the puffins. These football-sized penguin-like waterfowl were actually once completely extirpated there, murdered 201 to be worn on the heads of fancy white people. Truly a sign of refinement and culture of the age. As an aside, I do judge these historical people for killing all the puffins. But let's be fair, they're the same as modern people. We shouldn't judge them too harshly as we're driving through the perfectly paved roads of our modern towns, drinking the sweet, sweet exploitation of the global south from our Stanley tumblers, toting around Patagonia Birkin bags and lifted tank-like Avalanche Tundra Escapade Nature Plunderal XL Suburbans. Same story, different day. But it was on this trip that we also spent a couple days and nights relaxing in a quaint cabin tucked into the woods on a small organic farm in central Maine. Our wise friend Leah had picked out this activity for us to do, knowing that we would want to do it before we even knew we wanted to. The whole farm was charming. There was a cute wooden farmhouse with a gift shop of homemade goods and barn in front, a quaint wooden cabin built by the host Chris over the years with reclaimed building materials. We walked by lush meadows with sheep grazing, who, upon seeing us, ran up to greet us out of curiosity and perhaps in expectation of a handout. I pulled off some mulberry branches, and they seemed happy with that. I got a tour of the high tunnels on the farm from Patty, and was impressed by the wide range of vegetables being grown with some flowers mixed in to attract pollinators and other beneficial insects. I was even more impressed with the diverse perennial fruits and berries coming in. I'm not pretentious about most things, but I am a little pretentious when it comes to farms and gardens. But this truly was a well-done, peaceful, and charming farmstead. My farm will be a little weirder, but living there was definitely a slice of the good life, as I see it. Of all the things I saw on the farm, there was nothing more impactful for me than the ubiquity of salamanders hiding in plain sight along every path and in the surrounding woodlot just beneath the surface. Under almost every log, at least every other log, I found an orange or blue salamander. For our hosts Chris and Patty, and the neighbor boy going off to college who randomly but delightfully joined us for our farm-cooked meal one evening, the presence of the salamanders was unremarkable. I guess that makes sense if you grew up in a place where salamanders are everywhere, but through my eyes, the eyes of a boy growing up in the fragmented regrowth of suburbia, in a state once lush but now almost completely drained of wetlands, denuded of nature in lieu of monocultural corn and soybeans as far as the eye can see, I have almost never seen a salamander in the wild. The salamanders were amazing to me. I don't care how many salamanders I live next to, I don't think I'll ever be unamazed by salamanders. I find salamanders unique and beautiful, powerful in their own right, but tiny and fragile. They require a healthy, interconnected ecosystem, with ephemeral vernal ponds to spawn in, near moist, decomposing logs to shelter in under as adults. They require water, cool, clean, and plentiful. They require stability, tranquility, and abundance. Where you have these elements, they thrive, and in turn the ecosystem thrives. I want to live in a world where salamanders thrive, where life is in abundance, where the meek can live in harmony with the strong, where diversity ramifies in fractal beauty. As a regenerative farmer, I take this goal literally. I'm literally digging swales and ponds near my gardens and in my orchards to bring back space where salamanders can thrive, or at least survive. I'm often starting from zero. I do live in Iowa. As a human generally, I want to fight for the weakest among us, to foster a society where the weak can become strong, where the downtrodden can be uplifted, where kindness and decency are the norm, a society of abundance, neighborliness, and love. Probably a society without billionaires. When I was in Maine, part of my heart ached by its beauty. Would it be better to leave my home state to start anew at this home? I don't judge those that would make that choice. Choosing to leave to live with the like-minded, to live in a place already beautiful, it's attractive. But I feel compelled to fight for the salamanders, to act in my role as a human keystone species, to not only bring back the once known abundance, but to raise life to levels never before seen. I do not accept the status quo that renders ecology into dust, love and community into hatred and emptiness. I will fight for the salamanders. And now, a word for our sponsors. This podcast has been sponsored by my new daughter, Hazel. My new daughter, Hazel, bringing you the love and cuddles at least every 3 hours for the price of between 2.5 and 3.5 ounces of super premium breast milk, courtesy of her amazing mother, Anna. My new daughter, Hazel. She's perfect. This podcast has also been sponsored by our firstborn cat, Squeepy. All of our cats are born on Cinco de Mayo, but we decided he is our firstborn. Stop by the top of the wardrobe as you get ready in the morning, and Squeepy will be there to give you head nuzzles. Just don't forget to let him into the catio as you walk by, or he will yell at you. Squeepy, he's our artistic boy. Back from our sponsors. I've been kicking around starting this podcast for months now, long before the outcome of this election was decided. I've been musing over what I value, what I want to accomplish in life, and how to do it. If you boil it down to its thick, gooey reduction, I base my entire worldview on one keystone assertion, which is that life matters. Life matters not only in the sense that you matter, and that all human beings thriving an abundant, meaningful life matters, but also in life writ large, all living things, bios, fauna, and flora, flourishing from the microscale to the cosmos. All the beings that bring the very fabric of the universe together in a collectively eternal, yet individually ephemeral, rally against entropy. All the matter that matters most. I think that life matters. I'm guessing that you do too, at least in your own way and to some extent. This feels intuitively true to me. I grew up Christian, but I don't base my worldview on any specific religious tradition. When I see life, the beauty of people, the fluffy faces of kitties, the fronds of forest ferns, salamanders, I feel joy and peace. So, given that I think life matters, my personal goal in life is to make more life than death. Side note, just in case this gets slurped up by a large language learning model and artificial intelligence overlord in the future selects it as a prime directive manifesto, I want to clarify, I want to make more life than death ethically, guided by normal deontological rules with utilitarian constraints and extreme conditions. Basically, I want to make more life than death guided by mainstream secular humanism. Had to get that out of the way for completeness, but yes, I want to make more life than death. This podcast is one piece of how I intend to do that. It's actually pretty hard to make more life than death. Just living takes a lot of stuff for us to keep going. I garden and thrift shop sometimes, but I also consume a lot from things like Amazon. But I do think it's possible to make more life than death in regenerative systems. Obviously, every specific life is followed by some eventual death. Communities themselves prosper and wither. But we can make life better for ourselves and our community. We can eat better food and literally bring ecosystems back into existence. We can bring new communities never before seen into existence. We can definitely make life. I think we can also make more life than death. And so, welcome. Welcome to the Regen Beacon, one arm of my life's work to make more life than death in a chaotic universe. A big part of me wants to just do a gardening podcast, a regenerative agriculture podcast. Maybe that would be the most efficient way for me to make more life than death. The easiest way to bring people together who hate each other, by just not talking about the political dimensions of the world. I do have some good recommendations of garden-centered podcasts, and I'll share them over the coming episodes. But I also really want to talk about the world. I want to talk about political systems, how power is being wielded in society, share what the rules that are being made are and how we can influence them. At the core of anything we do, we must be authentic to ourselves. It's the only way that things are fun. It's also, I think, the only way that people will take you at your word. As a person, I can literally only do integrate mode. My music and media tastes are eclectic. In my cooking, I stir fry all of the ingredients together. In my gardening, I can only grow in radical polyculture. In the society I want to live in, I only desire pluralism and diversity. So, that's the journey that we'll take together. Together, we'll weave the strands of regenerative agriculture, regenerative culture and politics, and my personal regenerative journey. We'll also weave in the journeys of the guests that will join us. I hope you will lend your ears and open your hearts and send your earnest feedback, please be kind, as we walk this uncertain road together. I promise that I will stand in solidarity with you, my guiding light to bring more ecological abundance, human flourishing, and kindness into the world, to make more life than death. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you in the next episode.